our sales center in our Menominee Falls office. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for our capacity requirements planning webinar. Since we're on a conference call, everyone is muted right now just to eliminate any background noises. Once the presentation is complete, we'll have about a 10 to 15 minute Q&A. So at that time, we will go ahead and unmute. If you have any questions or comments or anything during the webinar, feel free to send me a chat. We can either try to cover it during the presentation or during the Q&A. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Harry Milsession.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. And we're going to review one module, capacity requirements planning with simulation. And just as a little background, many of our customers over the years had implemented, usually with our assistance, a type of simulation by establishing a duplicate or a company of their data with a different name, but the data being copied over, and then using some of the programs against that copied company. But there was always that potential of a problem where you didn't have all functions working exactly the way you wanted to against the simulation company. So what we did with this module was to actually put together a workbench and functionality specifically designed to allow the simulation. So we created a CRP workbench, and it allows you to operate in multiple simulation companies. You could set up as many as you'd like. If you had 2 or 3 people, for example, you could set up a company for each of them with their initials, maybe. And then under that particular company, the CRP workbench will target that data for that particular company that's going to be in simulation mode. We also built into the workbench things such as being able to quickly refresh the data, as opposed to, as I mentioned previously, we could do something like that, but it kind of entailed copying a lot of data, and it took a little while to do that. So this facilitates getting the data into the simulation environment, and also providing all of the shop floor scheduling functions, because remember, this is called capacity requirements, and it really isn't designed to do a lot of material type of planning. It's more intended to take a look at the load that's coming from our material plan, translated into resource requirements in the plant, and then doing some simulation against that. It does allow you to run MRP and to run MPS in that simulation mode. And also, which is very handy, it allows you to just bring in your last, the results of your last MRP run, which would have all of the suggested or planned orders from that MRP run. And we also built in import functions so that if you wanted to, you could have a spreadsheet that someone prepared that maybe was a best projection from the sales department of forecast, for example, and you could get that imported into the simulation. Or you can key in firm planned orders. So if you looked at your MRP results and says, well, I wonder what would happen if I put a firm planned order in on this particular date. So you can enter data into the simulation environment as well as taking it in from spreadsheets. The tabs on the workbench, which you'll see in a couple of minutes, are very similar to some of the tabs on our other workbenches, some of them from the inventory manufacturing area on the manufacturing workbench, some from the shop floor area, etc., MPS, MRP. And we also have the order review file tab on the CRP workbench as well. The other thing that can be done is to reset the labor tables, etc., from your live environment to come in so that you can then, for example, on a shop floor simulation, you could maybe change a work center labor rate or labor grade, and it has the ones that are out there from your live environment. I mentioned the MPS, where the forecasting can come in, be brought in from a spreadsheet, but there's also a singular tab that we'll look at, which is just for MPS items, as opposed to on our regular manufacturing workbench, where there's a tab for inventory planning, and you can look at MPS exceptions or MRP exceptions. We kind of put that as a separate tab in the CRP workbench, so you could look at and maintain MPS. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with MPS versus MRP, very simple explanation. Master production scheduling is for items that have what I call independent demand, meaning that the demand for an MPS item is not really dependent upon a higher level item in a bill of material. It's normally things that you sell and ship to customers. So even a company that makes to order finished goods, like a machine tool, etc., they might have replacement parts or spares that they sell, and those spares might have independent demand, meaning a forecast of things you might sell off the shelf to customers as repair parts. Or companies that actually build their products to inventory and sell them from inventory. So master production scheduling is really the building schedule for those type of items. MRP, very similar capabilities to master schedule, except MRP is for dependent demand type items. So MRP would be for a sub-assembly that is part of a finished good that gets forecasted, and then the forecast is exploded through the bill of material, and there might be multiple levels of sub-assemblies, and that goes all the way down to purchased items. So MRP provides a production or a building schedule for manufactured components, and also a buying schedule for purchase components. So that's, when we talk about MPS versus MRP, that's really what we're speaking of, and it's all material oriented. I mentioned that you can run MRP, the regen, under the simulation workbench. Similar type setup where you can edit the parameters. For those of you that might be familiar with MRP, it has a set of parameters. You can auto post from your firm plan order or forecast files if you're using them in MRP. Most people do not forecast at the MRP level, but let it explode down through the bill. But you can run MRP with the Capacity Requirements Planning Workbench. And all of the order review functions, which are really the gateway into the execution side of the ERP, you can think of MRP and MPS and maybe inventory reorder point, or even customer orders that are for make-to-order products. You can think of them as kind of at the top of the diagram of the system, and those basically put the demand into the system, and then the planned requirements or production orders or purchase orders get passed into our order review file, and the order review file is kind of the gateway or the separation between planning and execution. So you've got all of the functions for the order review file as well in the capacity requirements planning workbench. A couple of caveats there that you can create shop orders in the simulation environment, but they're not going to be doing material allocations or printing shop orders. It's not intended to launch shop orders. On the other hand, there might be some purchase order or recs that can be allowed with user control to be created in the live environment, maybe some MRO type items or things like that. But by and large, you want to use capacity requirements planning to find out whether or not, if I put in these changes to my plan, or if I put in these changes to my capacity, what will happen, and then if it looks okay, then you can go and implement those into the live environment. You have, on the Work Center tab in the CRP workbench, you've got the same ability to go in and change the calendar and reschedule shop orders, change the department Work Center information, start and stop the background scheduler. So there's the same capability there, only remember it's not really affecting anything in the live environment. It's just doing it under your simulation company. Right down to this screen has an example of shop order where you can see that all of the same functions allocate, change, and as I mentioned, you can release the shop order here, but it will not allocate materials in the inventory system. Schedule, change dates and quantity, etc. And there's a reset program that is part of the workbench at the top of the screen. And the tab for resetting lets you select what you want to push into the simulation company. Do you want to push in the calendar or change it in the simulation company instead of using it? Do you want to bring in all the shop orders, MPS, your current MRP parameters, maybe the last run of MRP, and would you like to clear out your review file? And that's normally what I would suggest, is that you might bring it in and either bring in your last MRP run or just run the regen in simulation mode and have everything reset when you start your simulation. Okay, that's all I have for PowerPoint slides. Just leave that there. And go out to the capacity resource planning workbench. So this workbench, as you can see at the top, has a lot of the same type of icons as in most of the workbenches. So that you can, excuse me, I don't have a flash set up here, but you can refresh and move forward and backward, up and down the browser sections as you would in any other workbench. Now, what I have done here is I went and set up, I ran the reset, and I brought in all of the information, and I ran MRP just to see if it was the same as in my live company, and I used a location that was a demonstration location, the HM location with the pens in it. And this is the screen that gets you going. So you can specify, well, I want to bring in my shop orders, but I don't want to reset MPS because I've got a whole bunch of imported forecasts in my simulation, and I don't want to reset that. And maybe I copy or don't really care about my forecast and firm planned orders that might be in MRP. As I say, that's kind of unique. Most people won't enter forecasted orders for dependent demand items unless you're using that instead of actually putting in an MPS forecast for them. So this is the very simple screen that gets you going, the reset source data screen. And then once you're into it, then you can see what was brought in. And I mentioned earlier that we've got a separate tab for MPS as opposed to being part of the MPS MRP information in the manufacturing workbench. We've got a separate tab where MPS planning for this pen location I have has two items, the HM100 and the HM200. And down at the bottom of my screen, you can see I've got a workbench open in my live company that I created. I call it the WorkWise Enterprise System. And this particular workbench is the live company, and it has everything on it, including MPS, MRP, etc. So I just wanted to show you here under the HM200, if we look at MPS, you can see it has this 2380 and 2100, which was the running of MPS in the live environment. And when I go back here, you can see the 2100 and the 2300. But actually a little while ago when I was on the system, notice that there's a planned order here for 2000 and a forecast for 2000 that, if I look at my live company, is not there. And the reason that is there is just a few minutes ago, a half hour ago, under this tab here in simulation, I just hit the plus sign and I created this. So if I, again, if I went through and this particular line, if I get rid of that line, back out to MPS maintenance. You can see now on the MPS maintenance, you've got the 2380, you've got the 2100, but you don't have that 2000 item out there anymore. So it's just an example that under MPS major tab up at the top, you can manipulate the master schedule. You can go through what I just did, which is the maintenance program. You can go into the MPS parameters. And remember now, this isn't simulation, so it's not going to mess up anything in the live company. But you could go here and say, well, supposing I wanted to, have my planning time fence be set at, 8 weeks instead of 5 weeks. So make that change, and then run the MPS program, and it will make your time fence drop down to here. Now, for those of you that might be not familiar with that, DTF, PTF, demand time fence, planning time fence. Within those weeks, between those 2 points in time, the master scheduler is expected to firm up the schedule. And also, you notice the system will not generate any planned orders. These are planned orders, MPS orders, inside that time fence. So you see the 2380, it's dropped right here outside the time fence. So what I've done is I've set my time fence up, and then as a master scheduler, I should, within that 6, 8, 10-week time frame, I should be the ones calling the shot and figuring out what are the firm planned production that's going to be occurring during that period. So that's getting us a little bit away from the simulation side of it. But as you can see, what we just did is we looked at a different master schedule for this item based upon having an additional forecast put in. And also, if any of you are familiar with planning bills of material, you can also use and manipulate them. Now, this is a good tool for what if, because a planning bill is kind of a family forecast. So I can go to marketing and say, listen, why don't you just give me a rough estimate of the number of or percent of blue pens, yellow pens, and red pens. So I could put in the fact that we're going to have 10,000 of these pens sold, and maybe 20% are going to be blue and 30% are going to be yellow, etc. And then the planning bill of material will be exploded and distributed so that you've got an MPS for the blue, the yellow, and the red, and it has the forecast all split up according to the percentages. So this planning bill of material is a nice tool to use in the simulation area as well. And of course, it's available, goes without saying, in the live environment. So when you go into planning, the other thing I'll mention, and let's just take a look at this forecast function. These are the icons where you can have a spreadsheet open and you can just say copy and then paste a bunch of things from the spreadsheet. Or you can insert into this. You might have maybe 15 lines here and you want to insert one in. You can insert a line. And you can also create a template right in this function for Excel. So you can put in the item and the quantity and the date and the forecast. And then you can even have a spreadsheet that someone sends to you from marketing and sales and says, here's what we think we're going to do. And you can import that into this screen. And then this will then be picked up by the MPS regen or the MPS maintenance update. So you've got your icons here for adding and deleting and saving and refreshing, but you also have icons to paste or actually import from an Excel spreadsheet. So you can take your MPS forecast in from a variety of sources. If we skip over to the next ones, because what we've looked at so far has just been this first tab, the MPS tab. You've got your MPS planning, which is same functionality. Click on this. This goes in. And this does an online real-time regen of the MPS item, just as if you were doing an MRP regen, only this thing is not exploding manufacturing bills of material. It would explode the planning bill of material if you had percentages at that level. So here we have this particular capability, and as I mentioned, you've got the ability to change the factors, and rather than just going into the maintenance, you could just say, recalc it as opposed to, and this will let you do a whole bunch of items instead of just one item. So you can do a batch update if you've messed around and put in simulation data for like a whole product category. You can then run a recalc for the whole product category. So there's a lot of functionality as far as MPS. When you look at MRP, basically there's a screen similar to the MPS screen where you can add, delete, save, refresh forecasted orders, and also do the importing or inserting from spreadsheets. So it's very, very similar to the MPS side. So if you had I guess the best example would be you've got a component, a motor, and you use the motor to manufacture a whole bunch of different products. And all of a sudden, marketing says, well, we think we can sell we've got a bunch of these in stock, and we think we can sell them to the customers that have this product. And maybe we can put a thing on the website and say we've got these motors available, and you can use them in other applications. So you might be able to sell these motors off and lower some inventory costs, and put the forecast in here, and then MRP will pick that forecast up. So what you're doing there is you're combining normal dependent demand with independent demand. So you've got the same capability to put in a forecast order or to put in a firm planned order. Now, ERP has 4 terms that we all should be familiar with: supply and demand, okay, and capacity and load. And those 4 terms go through the entire ERP system. Supply and demand. Well, anytime you put in a forecast or anytime you have a customer order, that's demand, I'm sorry. There you go, how easy it is to mix them up. So demand is forecasting or demand from customer orders. Supply are planned or released manufacturing or purchased orders. Very simply put. Planned or released manufacturing or purchased orders. So MRP and MPS create suggested planned manufacturing and or purchased orders. A production scheduler or planner can go in and say that that planned order is firm, or they can make a planned order firm. And when you do that, what's that going to accomplish? Well, it's sacrosanct. A regular planned order for MRP, if I rerun MRP and all of a sudden MRP says, oh, I had a planned order for 600 of these, I don't need them anymore. Somebody put a shop order out there for 1,000, so I don't need the 600 anymore. But if somebody made the 600 a firm planned order, MRP is not going to get rid of it. It's going to leave it there. So, a planned order versus a firm planned order, they're both supply type orders, but the difference is a firm planned order will not be moved. So if you're simulating, that's why you may want to put in some firm planned orders. So you can put in MRP demand, forecasted demand, or you can put in MRP firm supply. And then, after you do that, you can run MRP. So here you've got the functions to run MRP, including the prep and purge if you use that capability, although I would hope that most of our customers now use the parameter in the parameter setup here of MRP, where under purge and post you can actually say get the orders, get the firm planned orders, get the shop orders, get this, rather than going in and doing them one at a time. So here we can make our simulated changes, go in and put in, now that I've, remember if I've changed the MPS, I could put in a forecast for MPS and have that 3,000 sitting there, or I could go into MRP and put in some forecast or some firm plan orders, and then I can just go into here and run, run the regen. And this regen, it runs the same way, as it would in the live system, except for the fact, of course, it's being run over here in simulation mode. Just let this go. It takes a few seconds. I don't have a huge amount of data. So I got 55,000 IOs functions I ran. So that basically, covers the MPS and the MRP side. Now, once you've done that, if I go over to here, and I already had looked to see what was there, but here I've got the order review file. So I ran MRP, and how about if I just say this one? I'm going to go in here and see if I want to do any dates in particular. I don't think I have that much data here, so I'll just go in and say location HM. Now, it does still print out the same reports telling you that, if you had any transfer errors on those reports. And so when I go here to my refresh, you can see that in addition to the ones that I had here, it didn't get rid of these, because what I did is before our session, I went in and said bring in any of the MRP orders that are generated. So they're still there, but notice this pen, HM200, is there. Remember the 2380 that was showing up on the MPS? Well, now that's in there. So now I've got that in there, and I can work off of this the same way I work off of it with my live system. I could go into this, and I could tell this thing to select it and release it, and then I could look at the effect it's going to have on the plant. Okay, so if I went into here and selected this, bring up the requirement, make sure all my codes are okay, that I don't get bit on something. Notice how it's grayed out here, because it's not going to do that in the system. So we got quantity ordered of 2380, and all the information is defaulting, and I can change it. I can change the dates. It's got 3/1 as the request date. So you can do all the same things you would do in the normal environment. Of course, you can do blanket selects too if you had a whole bunch of orders. As you can see, like right here, you've got 2, and here you've got 2. So if you had 15 orders, you could just select them in mass, as opposed to what I just did. So I selected that and that HM200, and then you can just go through in simulation mode. And I don't think I have anything else out there, so I'll just do that one. So this basically create a shop order for that 2380. And when we go back into our CRP simulation screen, this is exactly like manufacturing workbench. It's not, any unfamiliar things if you've used manufacturing workbench. And here I've got my pen set up as the work center area that I'm looking at. And here you can see the 2380 that was released. Now, it's showing up twice because I'm looking at shop orders, so you notice it's got operation 10, operation 20 here. But this is the one that we just told the system to release. And so that obviously would have an effect on my load situation. As I mentioned, there's supply and demand, and then the other two terms, capacity and load. Capacity is your ability to get work done. Any department, any work center, any machine for any period of time is capacity. And you can adjust that capacity. The load is coming from the released work orders. So, we went in and under simulation, we now look at this and we can see that this particular area has, a little bit of load down here, which, unless I released it in my live system, I just flipped over to my live workbench here. And under the live workbench, I'm going to flip to the manufacturing area. And these are the shop orders. And you can see these shop orders, I just sorted them on descending quantity here so we can see. You notice there's no 2380 here. So there's no 2380 here, and the load profile doesn't really reflect that particular shop order that we released. Whereas on our capacity requirements planning system, you've got the 23.8 hours. So that's an example of how I can look at, well, what would happen if we decided to release the master schedule for that particular item or that particular date and time, or maybe 15 items. And then you might look at this load and say, wow, look at that, everything is going to be overloaded. What I just did certainly didn't impact it, no big deal. It's not really making that big of a dent because I've got capacity up to this point. Yet on the other hand, I do have a couple of areas, like the week of 131, which again, you've got the ability to go into the visual scheduler and do all the things that you can do with the visual scheduler in the live environment. So I might want to simulate changing and rescheduling. There are only two things you can do when you have a capacity problem. You can either change the capacity or you can change the load. How do you change the load? Well, you can change the load by changing the shop order dates, even changing quantities. Okay, if it hasn't, especially if it hasn't started yet, you might want to say, let's not make that many. You can also split off, take a shop order that's been started and say, let's split off half of it and put the date out on the split. So you can change the load, and changing capacity, you can change the calendar, you can change the work center efficiency rate, which always should be set to give you a little cushion. I don't like seeing work center efficiencies at 1.0 because that means that work center is perfection, and it doesn't really exist in most manufacturing environments. So, if you've got some flexibility there where you've set your efficiency factor at 0.8, maybe you can bring it up to 0.9 and increase your capacity. Or you can put more operators or machines on a particular work center, and you can do that for a specific week or a few days, as opposed to changing the entire shift, for example, a calendar change to the shift. So you've got the ability the same ability to look at and drill in to the detail after you make those changes. So remember, we went through and looked at the schedule, ran MRP, brought some things into review, released one of the finished items as a shop order, and then we're looking at the simulation after that fact. And as was on that PowerPoint, remember, you can go up here and maintain the calendar. You can go up here, change work center, reschedule, stop the background schedule. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, if you made a bunch of changes, I mean, it's okay. You change one shop order and you click on reschedule and reschedules it. But supposing you change a whole bunch of shop orders, you change the dates or something, then, you know, that puts it, all those changes get thrown into the queue file, the background queue, and you start that scheduler up and it'll go through one by one and reschedule them, make those changes. So it's a very tight, nice environment for doing what ifs. And then once you decide and get agreement from other people in the company, then the decision can be made to do the implementation, and it might not all be done at once. I mean, you might come out of a simulation and say, well, listen, we're going to take that sales forecast they gave us for next quarter, and let's just put in the first 6 weeks and put it into our live system as opposed to putting the whole thing in. So it's a decision point that would be made after you did simulation. So if you, just to kind of recap the screen, and again, remember there is really just this one screen, although it is bringing in other applications, and it's giving you the full functionality of those applications, except for the fact it's doing it under whatever simulation company you're in. So you do have the ability to run and modify and change MPS even to the planning bill level. You have the ability in MPS to bring in or enter forecast. You don't have to bring in a spreadsheet. You just say enter, 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 and this thing has lookups, etc. So you can bring in forecasts from spreadsheets, or you can enter them. And in MRP, you can do the same thing. And in MRP, you can do it in 2 different ways. Now, you might say, well, MRP has a function for a firm planned order. How come there wasn't one here? Well, it's because this MPS planning screen, when you go into maintenance, you enter the firm planned order right into that screen. MRP doesn't really have that screen, so that's why under the MRP we have an entry function here. And of course, both of these have the ability to have spreadsheets imported. Then the order review has all that functionality. You could even simulate your plant and equipment. That's what the P&E is here. If you've got plant and equipment module and you've got plant and equipment modules generating planned PM orders, then you might want to bring them in and see what that effect might have. And that's pretty important. If I've got a PM on a major machine, a CNC machine next week, and I've got this big customer order out there that's going to be impacted by that, I might want to change the P&E schedule. So you can copy from plant and equipment. You can, if you're just running even just order point for some very stable items, and by that I mean they've got a very stable demand pattern, you could run the reorder point advices into the review file as well as MRP and MPS. And then once they're in here, you have the full capability. As I mentioned, here's a spring and it's got a bunch of planned orders, so you can combine them into one and select and the one that's called simulation really brings all of that data together, because here is where the results of the released work orders, which is going back to the beginning of the PowerPoint where I mentioned it. Remember, this is really about capacity requirements. Okay? It's really about looking at the effect on this bar graph of what you do to change the demand pattern and also change your capacity as far as work center efficiencies, work center number of machines, work center calendar tie-in, etc. So it's to see what that effect is on this particular graph, or if getting more to a granular level, as we say, to see what the effect will be on this particular graph. And then do whatever you need to do, drag, drop. These tabs up at the top are for the calendar, for the work center. So you've got these same type of tabs at the top of this screen, but on that screen you're really looking at a more granular presentation of the shop orders, right down to the operation level. Okay, I also wanted to mention one other thing regarding this, and that is that this was, let's see if I have my, there it is. Because I don't know if everyone who signed up is on the call, but on the call we have a couple of companies that are upgrading to 9.6, and we have a couple of companies that are on 9.5, one on 9.3 and one on 9.4. Now, this module came into being with 9.6. So if you're on 9.3 or 9.4 or 9.5, you would need to upgrade to get it implemented, the capacity requirements planning module. That was part of all this. This is just a chart we have, by the way, to show, you know, what was added in each of the releases all the way back to 8.3 when we went to the SQL database. So the 9.6 is an important thing to note. And this has really nothing to do, but when I do any of these sessions, because I think it's a really nice customer capability, for those of you that have not gone out to our new customer center, please do, and please register so that when you go out here, if you don't have a sign-on, you can register. And this is tremendous information out here. I just clicked on videos, and our educational series is here, as well as all of the sessions such as this one. So you can see a 1-hour review of 9.7, and just take a look at how many there are. Okay, we've got 51 of these, including CRM, credit, cash. So it's finance, manufacturing, customer order processing, distribution, inventory, everything's out here. And again, that's these sessions, the WES sessions, the WorkWise educational series. Well, these are more detailed, and they actually are more training oriented. So if you're thinking of purchasing performance management and you say, well, what does that really do? I mean, there are 5 sessions out there for performance management. So under our brand new customer center, there's really some nice capability, and if you have a question, you can put it into the forum. It's all summarized. You can see the topics, how many people are posting to it. You can get involved in going back and forth with other users. You can submit enhancement requests. Every single release of ours has at least 50% of the content comes from our customers. Every single release. And in some releases, it's more than 50%. The capacity requirements planning module came from the executive session at our 2012 conference. So that's where that requirement originally started, was at our executive session at the 2012 conference. And of course, you can log cases, go into the support center as well. So there is a link to this right on our WorkWise WorkWiseLLC.com website, or it has its own link, customercenter.workwise.llc.com/. So please, get out there and get some good information and even exchange ideas with customers. Anybody have any questions? Jessica can unmute.
Yes, thanks, Harry. I'm going to go in and unmute everyone at this time. If you muted on your end, you also will have the ability to go ahead and unmute.
Sounds like we're in a supper meeting.
Yeah, I have a little bit of background noise, but I do have everyone unmuted at this time, so feel free to jump in and ask any questions that you may have.
If anybody thinks of a question afterwards, get in touch with me and I'll be happy to answer it.
Yes, after this webinar also, everyone will receive a feedback survey. So if you don't mind just taking a few moments to complete it so that we can improve on future webinars. Also, if you want to copy this recording, you can just mention it in that survey and we can send you the link. Otherwise, if you register on this Customer Center site, it will be posted in a couple days. All right, well, thanks. Oh, someone has their hand raised. Diane? Are you there? Diane, I can't hear you. If you want, you can certainly send me a chat and I can ask Carrie. Okay. I'm not hearing anything back, so like I mentioned, if you have any follow-up questions, just please include it in the survey and we'll have someone get back to you. Carrie, do you have anything else?
No, that was it. Thanks again, everybody.
Okay. Yes, thanks everyone for joining. You all have a great day.